I remember that first night as clearly as if it happened yesterday. The snow was heavy, each flake sparkling under the pale moonlight like a million tiny stars fallen to earth. I stood at the edge of the village of Albany, New York, where the story began. A young boy, wide eyed and shivering, yet trembling not from cold but from anticipation. Word had spread through the quiet streets, whispered by elders and passed along by travelers that tonight would not be ordinary. They said, a man, jolly yet mysterious, would ride through the sky, delivering gifts to the children, yet nobody truly knew who he was. They called him Santa Claus, a name that would echo through centuries, whispered by children and grown ups alike. And tonight, it was more than a myth, it was real. I watched the chimney tops of small wooden homes as the wind howled through the valley. The smell of pine smoke and roasted chestnuts clung to the air, and every longhouse was alive with light and laughter, unaware that something magical was about to pierce the stillness of winter. My heart raced as a distant jingling sound drifted toward the valley, soft at first, then louder, a rhythmic, metallic tinkle that made the hairs on my neck stand. Suddenly, a shadow passed across the moon. I squinted, and there it was, a sleigh, carved from dark wood, glinting in silver moonlight, pulled by reindeer unlike any I had seen. At the lead was a small reindeer, his nose glowing bright red, illuminating the snowy path ahead. Rudolph, they called him, the first of his kind, chosen for this night, his light cutting through the cold and darkness, guiding the sleigh like a beacon of hope. Santa leaned forward, jolly eyes twinkling, beard glinting with frost. His laughter rolled across the hills like thunder, but it was gentle, warm, carrying the promise of something extraordinary. He carried a sack that seemed impossible in its fullness, bulging with gifts wrapped in mystery and wonder. There was a strange rhythm to his movements, a dance between the rains and the sky, as if the night itself bent to his will. I felt a shiver run down my spine. This wasn't just a story, it was history being written. Every child's heartbeat, every flickering candle in every window was part of rhythm Santa followed, a choreography older than memory. The wind carried his laughter, the reindeer's hooves barely touching clouds, the jingling bells making a pattern that would forever echo in the hearts of children. The first stop was a modest home near the edge of the village. Santa landed slightly and silently on the roof, his boots muffled against snow. I watched as he knelt, reaching into the bottomless sack, pulling out toys, trinkets, and gifts wrapped in gold and red paper that sparkled under the candlelight. Each gift was precise, as if he knew the very heartbeat of child it was meant for. Rudolph's nose glowed steadily, reflecting off the icy rooftops, casting crimson light into dark windows. I could almost feel the magic in the air, a soft humming that resonated in my chest. It wasn't just the toys or even the sleigh, it was the promise of joy, of belief, of wonder, a magic that threaded itself into the very snow, the trees, and the village streets. And as Santa disappeared into the night, rising like a shadow through clouds, I realized something profound. This was no ordinary winter night. This was the birth of legend, the night when children would begin to believe, when stories would become rituals, and when one jolly man with a glowing reindeer would change the way the world celebrated. I pressed my hands to my cheeks, eyes wide, as Rudolph led the sleigh higher into the sky. The bells echoed, a sound that would forever be associated with hope, excitement, and the unspoken thrill that magic could exist, even in a world governed by logic, snow, and frost. And somewhere deep in that night, between rooftops and stars, the story of Santa Claus and Rudolph had begun. One that would span generations, ignite imaginations, and forever intertwine with the spirit of Christmas itself. By the time the sleigh vanished from the rooftops of Albany, the night had deepened into something vast and endless. Clouds rolled like snow oceans beneath the moon, and the wind carried a cold so sharp it felt alive. Santa did not follow roads the way men did. He followed sky roads, paths carved not on maps but in memory, belief, and tradition. These roads were invisible to the eye, yet unmistakable to those who knew how to read the signs. The shimmer in the clouds, the pull of distant hot fires, the rhythm of sleeping towns breathing below the snow. Rudolph felt at first that red glow of his nose brightened, pulsing gently, not just lighting the way but listening to the sky itself. Storms parted for him, turbulent winds softened. The sleigh followed wherever that glow leaned, as if the heavens themselves had agreed to guide them onward. The other reindeer, Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, and Blitzen, fell into a perfect formation. Hooves striking the air in a silent cadence that matched Santa's steady breathing. Below them stretched the American Northeast, blanketed in white. Small towns slept, unaware of how close wonder hovered over their chimneys. Rivers lay frozen like glass veins through the land. Forests bowed under snow, and distant church bells marked midnight as if signaling to the sky itself. Santa checked his list, not paper, but memory. Every name lived in his mind, every hope weighed and measured. This wasn't guesswork, it never had been. The list was not about punishment or reward. It was about knowing who needed comfort, who needed encouragement, who needed belief most of all. The sleigh dipped. They descended toward a small town tucked between hills in Vermont, where the houses were scattered and the cold settled deep into the bones of the land. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, carrying the scent of pine and sugar. Santa landed without sound, boots touching snow like a whisper. Time behaved differently here. Minutes stretched, seconds folded. The world had held its breath. Inside one house, a boy slept lightly, clutching a wooden toy already worn from years of play. Santa paused at the chimney, sensing something heavier than hunger or want. This child had learned disappointment too early. The gift Santa placed beside the hearth was small, a carved train, but it carried something invisible with it: reassurance, the kind that says you are seen. Back in the sky, Rudolph's glow flickered brighter as clouds thickened ahead. A storm was forming over the Appalachians, fast, sudden, and violent. The wind howled, pushing against the sleigh, threatening to scatter reindeer and legend alike. Santa leaned forward, voice calm, steady, unafraid. Hold the line. Rudolph did not more than lead. He decided, his nose cut through the storm like a blade through fog, opening a corridor of light. Snow whipped past them, thunder rolled beneath their hooves, but the sleigh stayed true. Below, children dreamed of falling and flying, unaware that those dreams mirrored reality overhead. As they crossed into Pennsylvania, the night grew denser, heavier. Old towns, older than the stories told about them, slept under layers of history and snow. Here, belief was quieter, tucked away in memories rather than excitement. Santa slowed the sleigh, listening. These places required patience, respect. At one rooftop, Santa paused longer than usual. The house was dark, no lights, no fire. He reached deeper into his sack than ever before and pulled out not a toy, but a bundle of warmth, gloves, a scarf, thick wool socks, practical magic, necessary magic, the kind Christmas was built on before it was wrapped in ribbons. Rudolph watched from above, nose glowing steadily, guarding the sky. As the sleigh rose again, dawn threatened the far horizon. Though the night was far from finished, Santa checked the sky roads ahead, westward now, toward wider lands, longer distances, and challenges the old stories never mentioned. The first leg of the journey was complete, but the trust lay ahead. The deeper they flew into the heart of America, the more that night would demand of them, not speed, not strength, but endurance. And high above the sleeping world, the sleigh pressed onward, bells silent, reindeer steady, Rudolph's light cutting a path through the dark that no map could ever record. By the time the sleigh crossed into the Midwest, the land below had changed its rhythm. The mountains were gone, replaced by long, unbroken stretches of snow covered fields that seemed to go on forever. Towns were farther apart here, lights were fewer, the night felt wider, emptier, like belief itself had been stretched into across the plains. This was where the work grew harder. Santa felt it before the reindeer did, a subtle heaviness in the air, a resistance not born of weather but of doubt. These places were shaped by long winters and harder truths. People here learned early to rely on their hands, their neighbors, their grit. Magic was something spoken of softly, if at all. Rudolph's nose dimmed for the first time, not extinguished, never that, but softened, as if the air itself was reluctant to accept its glow. The sleigh slowed. The other reindeer shifted uneasily, sensing the change. Santa placed a gloved hand on Rudolph's neck, steady and reassuring. Not everyone believes loudly, he murmured. Some believe quietly. Below them lay a farming town in Iowa, its streets empty, barns half buried in snowdrifts, windmills frozen in place like statues. The sleigh descended slowly, cautiously. Santa landed near a weathered farmhouse on the edge of town, where a single candle flickered in a window. Inside, an elderly man sat alone, staring at a photograph beside the flame. Christmas has not been kind to him in many years. Loss had taught him not to expect joy, only survival. Santa paused longer than anywhere before. From his sack, he pulled not an object, but a letter, handwritten, its paper warm despite the cold. It was a message of remembrance, of connection, of love that had not faded with time. When Santa returned to the sleigh, Rudolph's nose brightened again. The sky above the plains tested them next. Winds rose suddenly, fierce and erratic, sweeping across the open land with nothing to break their force. The sleigh rocked, bells clinking sharply, snow shot upward, blinding even Rudolph's knee sight. For a moment, the sky roads vanished completely. The reindeer fluttered. Santa did not shout. He stood, feet planted, coat whipping in the wind, and raised one hand. The sleigh steadied, not through force, but through balance. He listened to the storm, felt its pattern, waited for the brief lulls between gusts. Then quietly he nodded to Rudolph. Now. Rudolph surged forward, nose blazing red hot, carving a narrow path through the chaos. The sleigh followed, skimming the edge between sky and storm, moving not against the wind but with it. Below, the plains blurred into white and shadow. They reached Chicago near midnight. The city glowed beneath them, lights stretching endlessly, reflecting off Lake Michigan like a second sky. Here, belief lived in flashes, childhood memories buried beneath adulthood noise. Santa worked fast, moving from rooftop to rooftop, slipping through chimneys and fire escapes alike. The sack lightened, but the night grew heavier. In one apartment, a child slept on the couch, three lights blinking softly. Santa placed a gift beside her and paused, listening to the city breathe, sirens in the distance, wind between buildings, the quiet hum of millions of lives overlapping. As they lifted off again, Rudolph hesitated, staring east toward the dark water of the lake. His nose flickered, responding to something unseen. Santa followed his gaze. Beyond the city lights, the sky thickened again. The next leg of the journey would take them into colder air, deeper silence, and regions where the night itself seemed to resist warmth. The plains had tested belief. What lay ahead would test endurance. The sleigh turned west, and behind them, the Midwest settled back into sleep, unaware of how close it had come to losing its quiet magic. Ahead, the long road through the sky waited, uncharted, unforgiving, and necessary. And so they flew on. Rudolph's nose, Rudolph's light, steady once more, carrying Christmas across a land that believed in many different ways, but needed it all the same. West of Chicago, the land changed again, not suddenly, but deliberately, as if the world were easing them into something vast and unforgiving. The plains stretched wider than memory, a frozen ocean without waves, only wind. Towns became dots, lights became rare. The sky felt higher here, heavier, pressing down with an ancient quiet that made even the bells on the sleigh seem too loud. So Santa silenced them. With a practiced motion, he wrapped the bells in cloth, muting their song. Christmas would move differently now, soft, careful, respectful of the land beneath. The reindeer adjusted immediately, hooves beating slower, steadier, their breath rising in pale clouds that vanished into the night. Rudolph's nose became the only constant light. It didn't blaze here, it endured, a steady, unwavering glow that pushed against the emptiness rather than trying to conquer it. Below them lay Nebraska, Kansas, the Dakotas, places where winter wasn't an event but a condition of life. Sound snowdrifts, buried fences, roads vanished. The land remembered storms older than towns, older than names. Santa felt the weight of it all settle into his shoulders. This part of the journey always demanded more than speed. It demanded patience. Here, Christmas wasn't loud. It wasn't wrapped in glitter or crowded rooms. It lived in kitchens warmed by single stoves, in families who measured joy carefully, saving it like firewood. The sleigh descended toward a farmhouse miles from any neighbor. No decorations, no tree, just a thin line of smoke curling from a chimney, struggling against the wind. Santa landed behind the house, boots crunching softly in deep snow. Inside, a woman sat at a table, sewing by lamplight. A child slept nearby, bundled in blankets. There were no stockings, no cookies, no sign that anyone expected magic to arrive. Santa paused, listening to the quiet, then reached deep into his sack. What he felt behind wasn't extravagant. A small wooden horse, a tin whistle, a warm coat folded with care, but woven into those simple things was something the sack carried only in places like this. Assurance, the unspoken promise that hardship did not erase wonder. Back in the sky, the wind rose again. This time it wasn't violent, it was relentless, a steady push that drained strength mile by mile. The reindeer leaned into it, muscles burning, breath ragged. Rudolph's glow wavered, not from doubt, but from exhaustion. Santa felt it instantly. He stood and called the reindeer by name, not loudly, but clearly, one by one. Dasher steadied. Donner found his rhythm. Blitzen shook his antlers and pushed forward, and Rudolph, rearing his name last, lifted his head and brightened, the red light sharpening once more. They flew for hours without stopping. Below them, the plains slid past in endless repetition. Fields, fences, frozen rivers winding like dark scars through white skin. Time lost meaning. The night became a tunnel with no visible end. Then, far ahead, a faint shimmer appeared on the horizon. The aurora, green and violet ribbons danced across the northern sky, silent and immense. The reindeer slowed, awed. Rudolph's nose reflected the colors, his red glow blending briefly with the lights of the heavens. Santa allowed them a moment to drift beneath it, the sleigh suspended between earth and sky, between struggle and wonder. This was why the journey mattered, not just for the gifts, not just for the children, but for moments like this, when the world revealed its quiet beauty, reminding even Santa himself why he kept flying year after year. As the aurora faded, the cold deepened. Ahead lay the Rockies, dark and jagged against the stars. The plains had tested endurance, the mountains would test resolve. Santa tightened his grip on the reins. Rudolph's nose flared brighter, reflecting off distant peaks like warning fires. The sleigh angled upward, climbing steadily, leaving the long silence of the plains behind. And somewhere far below, a wind swept across empty fields. carrying with it a trace of magic that would linger long after the sleigh had passed. The Rockies did not welcome them. They rose out of the darkness like broken teeth, jagged and immense, swallowing the stars as the sleigh climbed higher. The air grew thin, sharp enough to burn the lungs. Snow did not fall here gently. It whipped sideways, slashed by winds that had no patience for travelers, especially ones flying through the open sky. Santa had crossed these mountains many times before, but never without cost. The reindeer felt it immediately. Their hooves struck invisible currents that lurched and twisted, forcing constant correction. The sleigh creaked, wood stirring as if reminding Santa that even magic had limits. Rudolph's nose burned brighter now, not as a guide alone, but as a warning. This was a place where mistakes did not forgive. Below them, the mountain towns slept uneasily. Cabins clung to slopes. Mining towns lay half buried, roofs sagging under snow thick as silence. These were places where winter isolated people completely, where help did not come quickly, and where Christmas was sometimes the only softness in an otherwise brutal season. The sleigh descended sharply toward one such town in Colorado, tucked deep into a valley where the wind howled like a living thing. Santa landed on a roof rimed with ice, boots slipping for just a moment before he caught himself. He moved carefully here. Every step mattered. Inside the house, a fire burned low. A family slept closer together, blankets pulled tight. Outside, the storm roared, rattling windows, threatening to erase the world beyond these walls. Santa knelt by the hearth and placed gifts quietly, deliberately, nothing fragile, nothing that would break if the world grew harsher tomorrow. As if he climbed back to the roof, the mountain wind surged without warning. It slammed into the sleigh, throwing it sideways. One reindeer cried out as the harness jerked hard. Rudolph's nose flared white hot red, piercing the blizzard, but even that light struggled against the storm's fury. For the first time that night, Santa shouted, not in fear, but command. The reins snapped tight in his hands. He leaned his weight into the sleigh, shifting balance, forcing it to angle into the wind rather than fight it. The reindeer responded instinctively, muscles screaming as they pulled together, not apart. The sleigh climbed, higher, steeper, slower. Snow hammered them, coating Santa's beard in ice. His coat stiffened, heavy with frost. Each breath felt earned. Rudolph's glow flickered, not fading, but straining, like a fire forced to burn in a vacuum. They broke through the storm suddenly. Above the cloud line, the sky opened, clear, cold, infinite. Stars blazed with cruel brightness. The storm raged below them now, contained, snarling in the valleys like an animal denied its prey. The reindeer slowed, trembling. Santa let them rest for a heartbeat, just one, enough to steady, enough to breathe. He reached forward and pressed his forehead briefly against Rudolph's. Almost there, he said softly. Rudolph answered by lifting his head higher, red light spilling across the peaks ahead. The mountains fell away gradually, surrendering height mile by mile. The sleigh followed the descent, careful, controlled, until the land below flattened into shadow and snow once more. Utah, Nevada, vast, empty stretches where towns were sparse and distances unforgiving. The worst of the night had not been the storm. It was the strain, the reminder that even legends could be pushed to their edge, that Christmas survived not because it was easy, but because it was endured. Behind them, the Rockies disappeared into darkness. Ahead lay the desert, frozen and silent, waiting with challenges of its own. Santa loosened his grip slightly, not from comfort, but readiness. The night was far from done, and somewhere beyond the horizon, countless roofs still waited, quiet, hopeful, unaware of how close magic had come to breaking in the mountains behind them. The sleigh pressed on. Beyond the mountains, the world did not soften. It only changed its cruelty. The land below flattened into wide, frozen deserts. Nevada, Utah, places people thought of as empty even in daylight. At night in winter, they became something else entirely. The cold air was dry and deceptive. It didn't scream like the mountain winds. It crept, it waited, it stole heat slowly, without announcement. The slave flew lower now, not by choice, but necessity. The sky roads thinned here, stretched across long distances where belief was scarce and houses were few. Rudolph's nose became essential again, not just for navigation, but for confirmation. Confirmation that somewhere below, someone still waited. Miles passed with nothing beneath them but snow dusted rock, abandoned rail lines, and highways swallowed by drifts. Towns appeared suddenly, then vanished just as fast. Clusters of dark shapes clinging to the land as if unsure whether they should exist at all. Santa felt the weight of it settle deep. This part of the journey always unsettled him, not because it was dangerous, but because it was quiet in a way that felt permanent. Here lived the people most likely to be forgotten, and forgetting was the one thing Christmas could never allow. The sleigh descended toward a nearly abandoned town in eastern Nevada. Only three houses still showed signs of life. One light, one chimney smoking, one road barely kept clear by stubborn effort. Santa landed behind the smallest house. Inside, a woman slept in a chair beside a fire that had burned down to coals. A boy lay on the floor under a thin blanket, boots still on his feet, exhaustion written into the way his chest rose and fell. There was no tree, no decorations, just survival. Santa knelt. From the sack came warmth again. Thick socks, gloves, a heavy jacket, but also something brighter. A small box of paints, a sketchbook, a quiet invitation to imagine something beyond the frozen ground outside. As Santa rose, the house groaned softly in the cold. The desert wind whispered against the walls like it knew how close hope had come. Back in the air, the reindeer slowed. Fatigue pressed into them now, not sharp but heavy. This was kind of exhaustion that didn't announce itself until it had already taken hold. Rudolph's nose dimmed slightly, not from doubt, not from fear, but from the sheer length of the night. Santa adjusted the reins and made a decision. They would take the southern road. It added miles, it added time, but it spared the reindeer harsher headwinds that waited farther north. The sleigh angled southwest, following invisible currents that hugged the land instead of fighting it. Below them, ghost towns slid past, places once full of noise, laughter, ambition, now silent, frozen, forgotten. Santa did not stop at everyone. He listened instead, sensing where belief still flickered. One such flicker drew them down, a roadside motel, half buried in snow, one room glowing faintly. Inside, a truck driver slept fitfully, boots by the door, holiday radio murmuring softly through static. Santa placed a single gift beside the bed, a photograph frame already filled with an image from the driver's past, something long missed, carefully remembered. When they lifted off again, Rudolph's glow strengthened. The desert began to fall away as dawn threatened faintly at the edge of the world. Time tightened. The night had grown old. The reindeer pushed on, hooves beating slower but still together. Ahead waited California. The final stretch would not be easier. It never was, but it would be different. Warmer air, faster cities, shorter rooftops, less silence. Santa straightened, fatigue buried beneath purpose. The desert had taken much from the night, but it had not taken its resolve. And as the sleigh crossed the last empty miles, Rudolph's hair red light cut forward once more, steady and unwavering, carrying Christmas toward a coastline where belief looked very different, but mattered just as much. The air changed first, not in temperature alone, but in density. The thin, quiet cold of the desert gave way to something heavier, charged with motion and sound even before it could be heard. Below them, lights began to multiply, not scattered and lonely, but layered, stacked, endless. California rose to meet the sleigh like a living organism. Highways glowed like rivers of fire. Neighborhoods spread in grids and spirals. Thousands of rooftops pressed together, each hiding a different version of hope. From above, it was overwhelming. From Santa's seat, it was familiar but never simple. The reindeer felt it too. Cities demanded precision. There was no drifting here, no wide open sky roads. Towers reached upward, power lines cut across invisible paths. Air currents twisted unpredictably between concrete and glass. The sleigh dropped lower, waving with practiced grace through a world that barely noticed it. Rudolph's nose reflected off windows' snow, splitting into dozens of red echoes. The glow didn't guide by distance anymore, it guided by timing. Santa worked fast. In Los Angeles, gifts were placed in apartments stacked 10 floors high. In homes where families slept in shifts, in shelters where volunteers had finally rested after long nights of service. He moved unseen, through ventilation gaps, balconies, fire escapes where the city allowed. One step lingered longer than expected. A small apartment above a closed storefront. Inside, a single father slept on the couch. Paperwork spread across the table beside him. Bills, eviction notices, unanswered letters. In the bedroom, two children shared a mattress, a string of paper snowflakes taped to the wall. Santa did not rush. He left practical gifts here, food cards, winter coats, but also something harder to explain. A folded letter placed carefully among the paperwork. Not money, not magic, just clarity, the kind that made tomorrow feel possible. The sleigh lifted again, slipping between buildings as sirens wailed far below, unrelated and relentless. This was a city that never truly slept, only paused in fragments. Northward they went, San Jose, San Francisco, where fog rolled in thick and sudden, swallowing the world without warning. Here Rudolph became the anchor, his light cut through the white veil, steady against winds that tugged sideways, trying to spin the sleigh off course. Santa trusted him fully now. They landed briefly on a rooftop overlooking the bay. Inside, a woman sat alone at a table, a candle burning low. She whispered a name into the flame before blowing it out. Santa placed a small package beside the window, an old locket, carefully restored, holding a photograph thought long lost. When the sleigh rose again, dawn crept closer, staining the horizon pale gray. Time was no longer generous. The reindeer's breaths came harder now, steam rising in sharp bursts. Even Rudolph's glow softened at the edges. Though it never failed, Santa leaned forward, urging, not demanding, what remained. Ahead lay the Pacific Northwest. Cold would return there, so would forests, so would shadows older than cities and quieter than deserts, the kind of places where stories still breathed. Santa glanced once more at the endless lights fading behind them. Cities took belief and scattered it into millions of small pieces. It was his job to gather those pieces, even when they barely resembled the Christmas people imagined. The sleigh turned north, the night thinned, and the final trials waited beyond the clouds. The cities fell away behind them like a held breath finally released. As the sleigh crossed into the Pacific Northwest, the world darkened again, not with night, but with trees. Endless forests rolled beneath them, black-green and dense, broken only by rivers that cut through the land like cold several scars. Clouds sank lower here, pressing close, as if the sky itself wanted to listen. Snow returned, not gentle, not decorative. This snow came sideways. Winds poured down from the Cascades, striking the sleigh at odd angles, dragging at the runners, forcing Santa to adjust his grip. The reindeer leaned into it instinctively, hooves no longer gliding but working, pushing against resistance that felt alive. Rudolph's nose flared brighter, not louder, not hotter, but sharper. The light didn't spread far in this place. It tunneled forward, a narrow red corridor through mist and pine and memory. Below them, small towns appeared suddenly and vanished just as fast, logging communities, coastal villages, places where houses huddled together as if for warmth. Here, belief wasn't loud, it was practical. It lived in habits, in meals shared, in storms endured together. Santa moved differently here. He didn't hurry, but he didn't linger either. Every step, every stop felt weighted, as if the land itself was watching. In a cabin near Mount Hood, he felt a new set of tools for an old man whose hands still knew the forest, even as his body frailed him. In a town tucked against Puget Sound, he placed a violin beneath a bed where a girl practiced silently each night, afraid to disturb her exhausted mother. The forest absorbed these moments without comment. Then came the silence. It wasn't the absence of sound. Wind still moved, branches still creaked, but a listening silence, the kind that made the reindeer uneasy, ears flicking back and forth. Even Santa felt it, a subtle pressure at the edge of awareness. Something old stood beneath the trees, not hostile, not welcoming, just present. Legends lived comfortably here, not as stories told around fires, but as things remembered without words. Santa had crossed paths with such places before. He kept the sleigh higher now, respecting invisible boundaries drawn long before roads or maps. Rudolph glanced downward once, unease rippling through him. A shadow moved where no cloud passed. Santa placed a steadying hand on Rudolph's neck. Forward, he murmured, not as command, but a reassurance. The shadow did not follow. They reached the coast just as the horizon began to soften. Gray water stretched endlessly westward, waves folding over one another like restless thoughts. A lighthouse blinked below, steady and alone, cutting through fog thicker than any forest. Santa made one final stop here. Inside the lighthouse keeper's home, a small boy slept clutching a notebook filled with drawings, creatures, storms, skies. Santa left behind a compass, old and worn, its needle stubbornly true, not for direction across land, but through life. As the sleigh rose again, dawn pushed harder now, light bleeding into the clouds. The night was loosening its grip, but the journey was not done. Beyond the forests, beyond the coasts, lay the long return, and with it, the quiet reckoning that always followed Christmas. The moment when belief had to stand on its own, without magic to hold it up. Santa looked once more at the dark trees receding beneath them. Some places never forgot. The sleigh turned inland again, leaving the Pacific behind like a dream half remembered. What followed was not dramatic, but it was dangerous. The middle of the continent is where journeys are tested. Below them stretched miles of frozen plains, quiet towns stitched together by highways like thin scars across the snow. No towering mountains, no endless forests, just openness so wide it felt exposed, as if the world had moved its walls and left everything standing in plain sight. This was where fatigue crept in. The reindeer's breath steamed heavier now. Their rhythm stayed steady, but Santa could feel the subtle drag in their stride, not weakness, but accumulation. Hours layered upon hours, deliveries stacked upon deliveries, magic spent carefully, never wastefully. Rudolph's glow softened, not dimming, but conserving. It pulsed now instead of shining continuously, like a heartbeat, enough to guide, never more than it needed. They passed over farms buried under snowdrifts, barns standing like red punctuation marks against white sentences. In one farmhouse, a family slept crowded into a single room, heart failing, heat failing, hope stretched thin. Santa left more than gifts there. He left warmth that would last just long enough in the quiet assurance that endurance mattered. Storm clouds gathered far ahead, low and wide. Not a blizzard, not yet. This was the kind of weather pilots feared, the kind that didn't announce itself, that simply refused to move. Wind stalled, Snow hovered, visibility flattened into a white wall with no depth, no distance, no landmarks. The sleigh entered it slowly. Inside the storm, direction became a suggestion. Up felt like forward, forward felt like nowhere. Sound vanished almost entirely, swallowed by snow that didn't fall so much as suspended itself. The reindeer tightened formation instinctively. Santa leaned forward, reins loose but alive in his hands. He trusted them, always had, but trust didn't replace attention, it sharpened it. Rudolph's nose became the only color in existence, not festive red, survival red. It carved a narrow passage through the white, revealing just enough to keep moving, just enough to prevent panic. Santa counted silently, not time, but heartbeats. Every beat meant motion, every motion meant progress. Down, below, unseen, trains slowed, cars pulled over, radios crackled with warnings. People felt the storm as inconvenience, as delay. They didn't feel the weight of it the way the sleigh did. Then, without ceremony, the storm loosened its grip. The white thinned, shadows returned, the ground reasserted itself beneath them, solid and known. Towns emerged again, lights flickering back into meaning. The reindeer exhaled as one. Santa straightened, adjusting his coat, the fur rim stiff with frost. He allowed himself a single glance at Rudolph, whose nose dimmed just a fraction more, resting but ready. Good, Santa said softly. I had lay the eastern half of the night, the places where anticipation sharpened, where Christmas waited closer to morning. The margin of error narrowed there. The clock grew louder. Below them, church steeples cut the snow, and rivers curved like dark veins through the land. The sleigh angled slightly downward now, not descending, but committing. The long white middle was behind them. What remained was the finish, and finishes, Santa knew, were never gentle. The air changed as they crossed into the eastern half of the country. Not colder, tighter. Here, time mattered more. Here, time mattered more. The night was no longer an open canvas. It was divided into minutes, then seconds, then moments slipping past with quiet insistence. Below them, clocks crept toward midnight and then past it. In some homes, children were still awake, fighting sleep with stubborn hope. In others, parents whispered warnings and promises, unaware of how close magic already was. The sleigh picked up speed, not reckless, but deliberate. This was the phase Santa respected the most, not the beginning, full of optimism, not the end, full of relief. This was the stretch where the mission could fail without spectacle. No crash, no storm, just running out of night. Rudolph sensed it too. His glow sharpened again, not brighter, but more focused, less hollow, more blade. It cut through clouds that hugged rooftops and curled around church bells and radio towers. Cities appeared more frequently now, closer together, demanding precision instead of endurance. New York rose beneath them like a constellation fallen to earth. Santa did not linger. The city had learned long ago how to sleep through wonder. Skyscrapers parted cleanly for the sleigh, wind funneling between them like a held breath. On a single rooftop, a man working a late shift paused, looked up, and frowned, certain he'd seen something impossible. Santa left him nothing physical. Some gifts weren't objects. They moved on. New England followed, older towns, tighter streets, houses pressed close as if sharing secrets. Chimneys here were narrow, temperamental. Santa adjusted himself instinctively, movements practiced to the inch. A stumble now would cost time they didn't have. In one home, a child slept clutching a letter never mailed. Santa read it anyway. He always did. The gift he left wasn't the one requested, but it was the one needed most. Outside again, the reindeer surged forward, hooves never touching ground, yet somehow feeling it all. Rivers glinted below, half frozen, reflecting Rudolph's nose in broken lines. The sky to the east began to soften, not with light, but with the idea of it. Dawn was thinking about arriving. Santa checked the sky, then the land, then Rudolph. Not yet, he murmured, not a command, but a plea. Rudolph answered by holding steady, not falter, no flare, just unwavering guidance, the kind that didn't ask for recognition. The sleigh crossed into the lost time zone. Here, Christmas was no longer distant, it was imminent. Wind rushed louder now, as if urging them on. Houses thinned, forests thickened, coastal air crept inland, salty and sharp. The final arc of the journey waited ahead, where the night folded into morning whether the work was done or not. Santa's sack was lighter but not empty. The hardest part was never the weight, it was knowing exactly how much remained. And then, far ahead, on the edge of the world, the sky shifted, not light, but promise. The first hint of dawn was not light, it was sound, a faint thinning of silence, as if the night itself had begun to loosen its grip. Somewhere far ahead, birds shifted on branches without singing yet. Somewhere else, a clock clicked from 1 minute to the next with unusual finality. Santa felt it in his bones. This was the edge, the place every Christmas ultimately raced toward. Not failure, not success, but the moment where magic either finished its work or quietly stepped aside. The sleigh cut low now, skimming above tree lines heavy with frost. Pines bowed beneath snow like old witnesses who had seen this passage before. Rudolph's nose dimmed, not from weakness but restraint. Too much glow now, but would betray them to the walking world. They were ghosts again. Below them, small towns slept in clusters, their streets empty, their windows dark. Porch lights blinked off one by one, defeated by the inevitability of morning. Santa worked faster, not rushed, but exact. Every landing, every descent through a chimney was clean. No extra motion, no wasted breath. In one house, an elderly woman slept alone, hair tree still lit from the night before. Santa paused longer there. He left nothing wrapped, just a small object placed gently where it would be found by accident later. Some gifts only made sense in hindsight. Back into the sky, the east horizon bruised from black to deep blue. Stars retreated without protest. Rudolph glanced sideways, not with fear, but calculation. He had guided through storms and darkness, but dawn required a different kind of leadership. The sleigh angled slightly higher, buying minutes. Santa reached into the sack and found the bottom sooner than expected. Not empty, but close enough to make the heart tighten. They reached a coastal town where the ocean breathed slowly against frozen sand. The lighthouse was dark, no need of guidance tonight. Santa descended one last time there, boots crunching softly on a roof rimmed with ice. Inside, a child slept with headphones on, dreaming to music instead of bells. Santa smiled faintly. He left the gift beside the bed, close enough to be discovered before the world demanded attention. Outside, the sky brightened again, this time unmistakably. Rudolph's glow faded further, almost gone. His job was nearly complete. He had not failed. He had not faltered. He had done exactly what he was born to do. The sleigh rose one final time. Santa looked back, not at the land, but at the night itself, now slipping behind them. Every Christmas ended this way, not with applause, not with certainty, just with great and quiet departure. The horizon cracked open. Gold edged the clouds. Somewhere a child stood and smiled for no reason at all. Santa tightened the reins, not to speed away, but to let go, because magic was never meant to stay. It was meant to pass through. Morning arrived without ceremony. No trumpet, no thunder, just light, thin at first, then spreading with quiet authority across roofs, fields, rivers, and roads. The kind of light that did not ask permission, the kind that ended stories simply by existing. The sleigh was already gone. No contrail marked its passing. No hoofprint scarred the sky. Only a lingering sense, felt but never proven, that something important had just moved through the world and left it slightly altered. In houses across the country, Stillness held for a few more precious minutes. Then it broke. A child in a Midwest farmhouse woke first, heart pounding before memory caught up. He sat upright, unsure why he felt excited, then saw the tree and shouted so loudly the dog barked and the parents collided in the halfway, half asleep and laughing. In a coastal town, waves kept their rhythm as a girl padded into the living room and froze. The gift by the fireplace was not what she had asked for, but when she touched it, something loosened inside her chest. Years later, she would remember this morning as the moment she chose her path. In a city apartment, a tired night shift worker returned home, noticed something small and unexpected left on the kitchen table, and sat down without taking off his coat. He didn't cry, but he stayed seated longer than usual, staring at nothing, feeling understood by something he couldn't name. None of them saw Santa. None of them saw Rudolph, but they felt the after. Far beyond the vacant world, above cloud and current and time itself, the sleigh slowed, not from exhaustion, never that, but from completion. The reindeer relaxed as one, tension draining from muscles that had carried myth across a continent. Rudolph lifted his head. His nose glowed once more, not bright, not guiding, just warm, a quiet amber, proof that he had been there, that he mattered, that without him the night would have folded in on itself unfinished. Santa reached out and rested a gloved hand against Rudolph's neck. "Well done," he said, not loudly, the kind of praise meant to last. Below them, the world no longer needed direction. The night had done its work. The day would take it from here. No magic required, just memory. The sleigh turned north, not in retreat, but in rest, and as it vanished into thinning air, something subtle remained behind. Not belief exactly, not certainty, but permission. Permission to wonder, permission to hope, permission to believe that once, just once, a red light cut through the darkest night and made everything arrive on time. The bells were silent now. The story was complete, and somewhere already the next one was waiting.